Vanessa Coleman thought her dream was finally within reach. A new home, a fresh chapter, and a chance to give her children the life she never had. But then came the letter. Cold. Polite. Final. Doesn't fit the community's standards. No explanation, no appeal, just rejection. As she stared at those words, Vanessa felt the sting of something far deeper than paperwork. This wasn't about rules. This was about her. Her skin. Her place. Her worth. In that moment, she made a silent vow: they may keep me out today, but not forever. Vanessa Coleman's hands trembled as she held the envelope, the sharp edges digging into her skin. She had been waiting for this moment for weeks, the final approval letter that would make her dream home a reality. Her children were already asleep in the next room, and she could almost hear their laughter echoing in the big backyard she had promised them. For a single heartbeat, she allowed herself to imagine what life would look like beyond those elegant gates. She tore the envelope open with nervous excitement, her heart pounding. But as her eyes scanned the paper, the warmth drained from her face. The words were short, polite, and devastating. We regret to inform you that your application does not meet the community's standards. That was it. No explanation. No room for appeal. Just rejection, cold and final. Vanessa read the sentence again and again, hoping she had misunderstood. But the words didn't change. They cut deeper with every glance. Her chest tightened, her throat burned, and for a long moment she sat frozen at her kitchen table, staring at the letter as if it might dissolve under her tears. This can't be right, she whispered to herself. The house had met every guideline. Her finances were solid. Her credit score pristine. She had done everything right. Yet here she was, denied not because of paperwork, but because of something they would never put in writing. Something she had felt her entire life. Her phone buzzed with a message from her sister. Did you get the news yet? Praying for you. Vanessa couldn't bring herself to answer. How could she explain that once again, a door had been slammed shut, not because she lacked qualifications, but because she didn't fit? Her mind drifted back to her childhood. She remembered her father polishing his worn leather boots after long shifts, telling her that hard work could earn her anything. She remembered her mother, exhausted from 12-hour nursing shifts, smiling through her fatigue to remind her children that they deserved to dream big. Vanessa had believed them. She had carried those lessons into adulthood, working twice as hard for half the recognition, believing that persistence would eventually pay off. But tonight, staring at that letter, she wondered if her parents had been wrong. If the rules were never meant for her. Her eyes moved to the refrigerator, where her children's drawings were held up with magnets. Bright, hopeful pictures of houses with big yards and shining suns. They had trusted her promise. They believed her when she said better days were coming. And now, the weight of that broken promise crushed her chest. Vanessa folded the letter slowly, her movements heavy with grief, and placed it back into the envelope. She sat in silence, the hum of the refrigerator filling the room, until anger began to rise beneath her sorrow. This wasn't just rejection. This was humiliation. This was erasure. She clenched her fists, wiping away the tears streaking her face. One thought anchored itself firmly in her mind: if they thought this letter would silence me, they were wrong. Vanessa Coleman had lost this battle, but she would not lose the war. Vanessa Coleman sat on the porch of her small starter home, the rejection letter still folded neatly in her lap. The ache in her chest wasn't just about losing a house, it was about losing a fight she thought her parents had already fought for her. She could almost hear her father's voice, deep and steady, echoing from years ago: "They'll try to close doors on you, Vanessa. But remember, doors can be knocked down, and walls can be rebuilt." Her parents had never had much. Her mother worked double shifts as a nurse, often coming home with aching feet and tired eyes, while her father fixed cars in a rundown garage on the edge of town. Yet they gave Vanessa the one thing money couldn't buy: conviction. At the dinner table, they didn't just talk about food or bills, they talked about dignity, history, and resilience. She remembered one night vividly. She was only 9, sitting cross-legged on the floor while her father polished his old work boots. He looked at her with a rare softness. One day, he told her, "You'll own something they can't take away. Not because it's given to you, but because you'll fight for it. And when you fight, Vanessa, you fight for more than yourself. You fight for everyone who comes after." Those words burned into her memory. At school, when she was overlooked for awards despite her grades, she remembered. At work, when promotions passed her by until she proved herself twice over, she remembered. And on the day she walked across the graduation stage, her family cheering louder than anyone else in the crowd, she felt those words settle into her bones like steel. Vanessa's rise wasn't fast, but it was steady. Every late night at the office, every extra project, every moment she swallowed pride and doubled her effort, it paid off. She became one of the youngest managers in her department, her name whispered with respect in rooms where she had once been invisible. With her first big bonus, she didn't buy jewelry or a new car. Instead, she drove back to the small neighborhood where she'd grown up and handed her parents the keys to a modest but comfortable home. Her mother cried. Her father just nodded, as if to say, "I told you so." But even in triumph, that vow never left her. She wanted land, not just a paycheck. Roots that ran deeper than signatures on paper. A place where no one could tell her she didn't belong. So when the rejection letter came, it didn't just bruise her pride, it lit a fire. She saw her parents' tired hands, their sacrifices, the invisible battles they had fought so she could dream. She wasn't going to let an HOA decide her worth. Vanessa looked up from the letter that night, her jaw set, her heart steady. She whispered into the dark, "You may have kept me out today. But tomorrow, I'll walk through those gates. And I won't be asking for permission." Vanessa didn't waste time licking her wounds. She had been told no too many times in life to accept it as an ending. Instead, she treated it like fuel. The very next morning, while the rejection letter still sat on her desk, she opened her laptop and began researching. If the HOA wanted to play games, then she would learn the rules better than they did. Hours turned into days. Vanessa read bylaws, scoured property records, and highlighted loopholes. She learned that HOAs were businesses wrapped in the language of community. They thrived on control, but control had limits. She found out that anyone who owned property inside the community automatically had a stake, and the more property you owned, the louder your voice became. That was the crack in the wall she had been looking for. Vanessa called her lawyer, a sharp woman who had guided her through past business deals. Together, they dissected the HOA's rulebook line by line. Each clause became a weapon, each loophole a pathway. If they can reject me once, Vanessa thought, I'll make sure they can't reject me again. Then came the boldest part of her plan: buy. Not one home, but several. One rejection wouldn't matter if she owned enough property to become the HOA's biggest stakeholder. It wasn't easy. Vanessa spent nights scrolling through listings, analyzing bank statements, and running calculations until her eyes blurred. She sold off old investments, tightened her budget, and took meetings with real estate agents who underestimated her until they saw the cash on the table. The first purchase was the hardest, a modest townhouse tucked away at the edge of the community. When the deal closed, she held the keys in her hand and felt a quiet triumph. The gates that had kept her out now swung open for her. She didn't move in, not yet. This wasn't about living there. This was about strategy. The second and third properties came faster. Each time, she felt the weight of her parents' words echoing inside her: own something they can't take away. She was building more than a portfolio, she was building leverage. Soon, whispers started to spread. Board members noticed her name appearing on deeds. At first, they brushed it off. By the time she closed on her fifth property, they couldn't ignore her. The HOA president, Mr. Grayson, sent her a curt email: "We'd like to discuss your recent acquisitions." Vanessa smiled when she read it. For the first time, they weren't rejecting her. They were recognizing her. She printed the email, folded it neatly, and placed it beside the original rejection letter. Side by side, they told a story, from exclusion to power. Her plan wasn't just working. It was unstoppable. Vanessa leaned back in her chair that night, exhaustion tugging at her, but satisfaction warming her chest. She had gone from an outsider knocking on the gates to someone reshaping the entire foundation from the inside. And this was just the beginning. Because the real showdown was still to come. The HOA boardroom smelled of polished wood and old arrogance. Vanessa stepped inside, heels clicking against the tiled floor. Every head turned, some with curiosity, most with hostility. She could feel the weight of their stares, but she carried herself with quiet confidence. At the long table sat Mr. Grayson, the HOA president, silver hair slicked back, his posture dripping authority. He glanced at her like a man sizing up an uninvited guest. "Miss Coleman," he said coolly, "thank you for joining us. I trust you know why you're here." Vanessa smiled. "I assume it has something to do with the properties I now own in this community." A murmur rippled through the room. Board members exchanged uneasy glances. Grayson leaned forward, clasping his hands. "Yes. It's unusual for one individual to purchase multiple homes in such a short span. It disrupts the balance of the neighborhood." Vanessa tilted her head. Balance? Or control? The room went still. Grayson cleared his throat. "We have standards here. A certain fit we expect from residents. You've already been denied once because," he caught himself, hesitating. "Because not every applicant aligns with those standards." Vanessa's eyes sharpened. She pulled a folder from her bag, sliding documents across the table. "Here are the bylaws. Nowhere does it say an owner must fit your definition of standards. What it does say is that property ownership grants voting rights in this association. And as of today, I hold more properties, and therefore more votes, than anyone in this room." Gasps. Whispers. Someone at the end of the table muttered, "She's right." Grayson's face flushed red. "This isn't about rules on paper. This is about community." Vanessa leaned in, her voice calm but razor-sharp. "Community is not about exclusion. It's not about deciding who's worthy and who's not. You rejected me because you thought I didn't belong. Now I belong more than any of you can deny. And I'm not going anywhere." For the first time, the power shifted. The once dominant board sat silent, their authority slipping like sand through their fingers. One of the younger board members cleared his throat nervously. "Technically, she has the votes to challenge any policy. Even elections." The word hung heavy in the air. Elections. Vanessa let it linger. Then she gathered her papers, stood, and looked each of them in the eye. "I didn't come here to beg for a seat at your table. I came to take what should never have been withheld. You can either work with me, or watch as I work past you." She walked out, leaving a stunned silence behind. That night, whispers spread beyond the boardroom. Neighbors who once looked at Vanessa with suspicion now saw her as a challenger to the old guard. Some with hope. Some with fear. And Vanessa? She knew this was more than property now. The next battle wouldn't be behind closed doors. It would be at the ballot box. Word of the showdown spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. By the weekend, everyone knew Vanessa Coleman wasn't just another homeowner, she was the woman who had stood up to Mr. Grayson and lived to tell the tale. For years, Grayson had ruled the HOA with an iron grip. Families paid their dues, followed the rules, and stayed quiet. But Vanessa's defiance cracked that silence. Some neighbors began nodding at her in passing, others whispered encouragement when no one was looking. She noticed the shift, suspicion giving way to curiosity, curiosity to hope. Still, not everyone welcomed change. At the coffee shop near the community gate, Vanessa overheard an older couple complaining. "She doesn't understand how things work here," the woman said. "Grayson's kept this place perfect for years." Vanessa turned, offering a polite smile. "Perfection isn't keeping people out. It's building a place where everyone belongs." She left before they could reply, her words hanging in the air. Behind the scenes, she prepared. Her lawyer guided her through filing the paperwork to challenge the HOA board's leadership. With her property stakes, she had the right not only to call for a vote but to run for president herself. It was bold, dangerous, but necessary. The announcement shook the community. Flyers went up on notice boards: HOA election, new leadership vote. Grayson scoffed publicly, calling it a disruption and an attack on community values. But privately, he was rattled. He called emergency meetings, rallied his loyalists, and whispered fear into the ears of homeowners: if she wins, the neighborhood will fall apart. Property values will drop. Standards will vanish. Vanessa countered not with fear but with truth. She walked the streets, knocked on doors, and introduced herself not as a disruptor but as a neighbor. She shared her story, the rejection letter, the struggle, the dream of a community that lifted people up instead of pushing them out. "I'm not here to destroy what you've built," she told them. "I'm here to make sure more families can build with us." At first, only a handful listened. But day by day, the handful grew. Families who had once felt unheard stepped forward. Single parents, veterans, retirees, people who had lived under Grayson's rules quietly but uneasily now found their voice through Vanessa. The night before the election, Vanessa stood in her living room, campaign flyers spread across the table. Her father's old boots sat by the door, polished the way he used to keep them. She touched them gently, as if drawing strength. "This is it," she whispered. "Tomorrow, the gates break." Across the neighborhood, Grayson sat in his study, staring at the HOA charter. For the first time, his certainty faltered. The gates he had guarded for decades were under siege, not from outside, but from within. The community was divided. The air buzzed with tension. And when morning came, the ballot boxes stood waiting. The election day dawned crisp and bright. Neighbors filed into the community center, some carrying years of loyalty to Grayson, others carrying a quiet hope for change. Vanessa stood outside, greeting each family with a smile, her hand steady despite the storm in her chest. She wasn't just campaigning anymore, she was standing for every door that had ever been shut in her face. Inside, the air was thick. The HOA board sat at the front, Grayson in the center, his jaw tight. Ballots were distributed. Pens scratched against paper. Minutes stretched like hours. When the final count was read aloud, the room erupted. Vanessa Coleman, the once rejected applicant, had won by a margin that silenced even Grayson's most loyal supporters. For a moment, Vanessa just stood there, stunned. Applause swelled, echoing off the walls. Some neighbors clapped hesitantly, others with genuine relief, but together it was undeniable: the community had chosen her. Grayson rose slowly, his face pale but proud in its defeat. "The people have spoken," he muttered, his voice strained. He extended his hand, not in friendship, but in surrender. Vanessa shook it firmly, not out of spite, but out of closure. Then she stepped forward, facing the crowd. Her voice carried not just authority, but conviction. "You all know my story. I was told I didn't fit the standards. That I didn't belong here. But standards are not about keeping people out. They are about lifting people up. A true community is not measured by how many gates it builds, but by how many doors it opens. From this day forward, no one will be told they don't belong here. Not because of where they come from, what they look like, or what they've faced. We rise together, or we don't rise at all." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking deep. Then, one by one, people stood. A veteran in the back saluted her. A young mother clutched her daughter's hand and whispered, "That's our president." Vanessa felt her throat tighten, but she didn't let the tears fall. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry until the work was done. That evening, she walked through the same iron gates that had once kept her out. This time, they swung open wide. She jingled her keys, the sound sharp and clear in the cool night air. Behind those gates, children laughed, porch lights flickered on, and families sat down to dinner. Her father's words returned to her, steady and true, own something they can't take away. Vanessa hadn't just owned property. She had owned her story. And now, she owned her legacy. The gates were no longer a barrier. They were a symbol, a reminder that no wall, no letter, no prejudice could hold back the fire of someone who refused to be denied. And as Vanessa Coleman looked out over the neighborhood she now led, she knew this wasn't the end of her fight. It was only the beginning. Vanessa's journey was never just about a house. It was about dignity, legacy, and proving that no gate could hold back determination. From rejection to leadership, she turned pain into power, and silence into a voice for the entire community. Her victory wasn't only hers, it was for every family who had ever been told they didn't belong. And as the sun set behind the neighborhood she now led, one truth became clear: walls may divide, but courage tears them down. Vanessa Coleman didn't just win a seat, she changed the meaning of community forever.